we're learning about westward expansion. And recently, we've been learning reasons why people moved west. One of those reasons was the availability of land. Now, how did this land become so available when we know Native Americans lived throughout North America? The following story explains one instance of how land became so available. This is a story that would repeat itself time after time in this era we call Manifest Destiny. The Cherokee lived on land that once belonged to their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, great-great, and so on. Their homeland took up parts of Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia. They could live there in peace, just as their ancestors had for thousands of years. The United States even signed a treaty, an agreement in 1802, saying the Cherokee Nation could live right alongside the growing nation of the United States. This was Cherokee land. The Cherokee worked hard at making sure they could keep their lands in the Southeast. Many found that assimilating or becoming more similar to the white settlers would help them survive on their ancestral homelands for thousands more years. Many Cherokee farmed using the same methods as their United States neighbors. Some even began to dress like white settlers. Sequoyah, a Cherokee scholar, created an alphabet for the Cherokee language with 85 characters and one symbol per syllable. Children could learn to read and write within weeks. Having a written language, unlike other North American Native American nations, gave the Cherokee still one more similarity to their growing U.S. neighbor. The Cherokee were safe. This was Cherokee land. In the late 1820s, gold was found by Georgia miners. The land on which this gold was found was within Cherokee borders. Gold often has a magnetic property of a different sort. Gold attracted people. Suddenly, the Cherokee saw Georgians hungry for gold move onto Cherokee land. The Cherokee Nation turned to the Georgia state government for help. Stop the flood of Georgians, they asked. The Georgia state government responded by making it illegal for the Cherokee to mine for gold on Cherokee land. But this was Cherokee land. The Georgia state government then held a lottery. Those with winning tickets were awarded Cherokee lands. Georgian miners and settlers began to collect their prizes and began to kick Cherokee families off of their farms and out of their homes. But this was Cherokee land. Cherokee Chief John Ross and the Cherokee Nation decided to take their problem to the courts. They sued the state of Georgia, saying that Georgians had no right to take Cherokee land. It took 2 Supreme Court rulings to settle the matter. The Supreme Court cases are called Cherokee Nation versus Georgia and Worcester versus Georgia. The court finally decided that because the Cherokee was its own independent nation, the state of Georgia could not take their land. The Cherokee could stay. This was Cherokee land. The President of the United States was former General Andrew Jackson. You remember Andrew Jackson? The slave owner and self-proclaimed Indian killer who went after runaway enslaved people living with Native American Seminoles in Spanish Florida. Yes, the guy who helped take Florida from Spain. Now President Andrew Jackson said that if the Supreme Court rules we can't move the Cherokee, well, let the Supreme Court just try to stop us. Yep, the president, the head of the executive branch, whose job it is to enforce the nation's laws, proclaimed and said publicly that he would not enforce the law. If Georgians wanted to move the Cherokee, go for it, he said. But this was Cherokee land. One of the first things Andrew Jackson did when he became president was pass a law called the Indian Removal Act. This law said that the United States government could make treaties, agreements, with Native American tribes and exchange or trade their lands in the East with land reserved for them in the West. They called this land reservations. Sound fair? Well, for one, the land they were living on in the East was their homeland, going back thousands of years. And two, the land in the West offered in this exchange was nicknamed the Badlands of Oklahoma. Well, it was located in Oklahoma territory, and right, it was bad land. No way the Cherokee would sign this agreement. No way they'd agree to this treaty. Not after all they had been doing in the courts, suing for their right to stay. No way, right? Wrong. Cherokee Chief John Ross, fearing Cherokee lives would be lost if they didn't move, signed the treaty agreeing to give up Cherokee homelands in the Southeast and made it okay for the government to move them to the reservations in Oklahoma. Yes, he signed even though 90% of the Cherokee Nation disagreed. But this was Cherokee land. Wait, if 90% disagreed, they could do something about it, right? They did have the right to petition the government. So they sent a petition to the United States government. Perhaps they'd be able to stay. That's right. The United States government even says in the First Amendment that people have a right to petition the government for change. If 90% signed, hey, that's a lot of names. Surely the government would understand. The government did not understand. They rejected the petition. In 1836, under the direction of President Andrew Jackson, 16,000 Cherokee were driven from their homes and forced out of their farms by gunpoint. As they left these ancestral homes, some Cherokee watched in horror as Georgian settlers dug up Cherokee graves, searching for bits of silver. They were marched through all conditions, freezing rain, bone-chilling winds. Many Cherokee became sick with pneumonia and other sickness. Over 4,000 men, women, and children died in the 1,000-mile trek to the reservations waiting for them in the Badlands. 4 other major Native American nations of the Southeast, the Chickasaw, the Creek, the Seminole, the Choctaw, were also forced on this march. It was called the Trail of Tears. Before the removal began in 1836, the Cherokee pledged they would not ever go to war with the United States over land. They said they would trust the fairness of the American people. If they were disappointed, they believed that one day the country would come to understand the wrong that was done to them. Perhaps that day arrived in 2009, when President Barack Obama signed an official apology for the mistreatment of Native Americans by the United States. The sad story of the Trail of Tears was not an isolated event. The available lands we spoke of came at a tremendous cost to the Native people.